All right, everyone, let's get started. Today, it's our great pleasure to have Professor Kohei Kawaguchi from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology to tell us about the merger analysis in the apps economy and empirical model of ad-sponsored media. Without further delay, let me just give the floor to Kohei to tell us about the paper. Kohei, you have 25 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you for inviting me for this great seminar series. Today, I would like to discuss my paper titled Merger Analysis in the App Economy, an empirical model of ad-sponsored media. Okay. So we have seen many important antitrust cases in the app economy. And the most recent one will be the case between Epic Game and Apple. And there are many reasons why the analysis of this economy is not straightforward. But one of the reasons is that multiple monetization policies coexist in this market. Like some apps charges price to consumers, while some of them show advertisement to consumers to earn revenue. And because of this coexistence of multiple business models, the analysis that are primarily based on the price variation face some difficulty. And this creates some room for misguided policies. To deal with this problem, in this paper, we would like to study, first of all, how we can estimate sale, demand, and supply parameters of such an imperfect competition of ad-sponsored media, where multiple monetization policies coexist. And based on that, how we can conduct the traditional merger analysis, including the relevant market definition and merger simulation. And we also want to ask how we can extend the analysis to the related issue, such as the effect of changing the transaction fees imposed by marketplace. This is exactly the topic related to the Epic Game and Apple case. To do so, we developed an empirical model of ad-sponsored media where consumers face both budget and time constraint. And app developers compete in the utility that they offer to the consumer through the setting of price and the intensity of advertisement to the consumers. One good feature of this model is that we can introduce a well-defined notion of consumers' costs integrating both price and watching advertisement for using an app. And this facilitates the following analysis. Then we establish an estimator of the parameters of this model based on available data about Google Play in Japan. Finally, using this estimated model, we will conduct an SSNIC test, an extended version of SNP test, and run merger simulation and study the effect of transaction fees. Specifically, from our estimate, we find that the disutility of watching an app for a consumer is approximately 5 to 6% of the app's advertising revenue. And this is slightly lower than the numbers known in the literature. And we also find that game apps are more segmented from the consumer's viewpoint by their categories than non-game apps. And this has some implications for the following analysis. For example, when we conduct an extended version of SNP test, which is SNIC test, we find that none of non-game categories are considered to be an antitrust market. But some game categories, such as action, puzzle, and role-playing games, will constitute relevant market. And then we conduct a merger simulation in which a hypothetical monopolist may own all the apps belonging to a particular category. And then we find that the results are aligned with the SNIC test, in the sense that only the mergers within the detected relevant market will have large impact on the welfare. In this sense, this will validate that the SNIC test is a convenient screening device for anti-competitive mergers. Finally, we study the transaction fees effect, and we show that theoretically, it is possible that the reduction in the transaction fee can increase the price and reduce advertisement rather than reduce the price. And also, based on the estimated model, we show that this is not a pure theoretical concern, especially for non-game apps. So this is a brief introduction of the paper. So first, I would like to describe the model. We consider a weekly market. And in each week, we observe a set of apps that is indexed by J. And there is also a set of app developers indexed by D. And this can own multiple apps. And there is a mass of consumers. At first, a developer of app J simultaneously decides the download price Fj, which includes the in-app purchase and subscription fee, and advertising intensity. This is the number of advertisement that a consumer has to digest per unit of usage time. And observing this menu, consumer will decide which app to download and choose how much time to use on the downloaded app. And then, based on this model, we consider a static pure strategy Nash equilibrium. And in this model, the equilibrium is unique as long as the magnitude of random coefficient is moderate. Okay. First, I would like to describe consumer's problem. The index utility from downloading app J for a consumer UIJ consists of the usage-related surplus and the download-related surplus. So this is discrete continuous choice model. And this download-related part is similar to the standard discrete choice model. So it depends on the characteristics of the app with some taste parameters specific to consumer. And Fj is a download price. And alpha y is the disutility of paying a unit of money. And CushieDJ is an unobserved characteristics of the app that can be correlated with the price and advertisement. And epsilon ij is an idiosyncratic preferential. The usage surplus is evaluated at the optimal usage time. And this function consists of this formula. First, there is a term that represents the marginal utility from a unit of usage time. And there is a satiation parameter. And this marginal utility of usage is given by the term that is explained by the observed characteristics of the app. And this is the important part. It also depends on the intensity of the app. Here, alpha A is a disutility of watching an advertisement. And W is opportunity cost, like a wage. And CushieUJ is an unobserved heterogeneity that describes the marginal utility of an app. Okay. With this specification, we can derive analytically the usage time Qj and download share Sj. And one important point is that we allow for a random coefficient on the download related usage time, but we do not allow it for the coefficient on the price and for the usage related utility. Okay. Next, I would like to describe the developer's problem. The developer's problem is to maximize the sum of the per app profit by changing the price and advertising intensity. The per app profit is given by this. Sj is the number of download, and this is the revenue per download. And the revenue per download consists of the revenues from consumers and revenues from advertisers. And Fj is the revenue from consumers, and this is taxed by the market price. And the transaction fee is low, and this was 30% in the date when during the data period. And Qj is the usage time, and Aj is the number of app per usage. So Qj is a number of advertisement shown to a consumer who downloaded this app. and R is an advertisement price. So this constitutes the revenue that an app developer will get from the advertisers when a consumer downloaded the app. And lambda is the marginal cost of changing the usage time, and epsilon j is idiosyncratic shock to the download-related marginal cost. The total profit is simply the sum of app-level profit, and each developer will choose the advertising intensity AJ and download price FJ simultaneously across all apps to maximize this total profit. But this is subject to the non-negativity constraint on the advertising intensity and the download price. In this framework, the free apps and unfree apps are simply captured by a corner solution of these non-negativity constraint. Now, to facilitate this analysis, we would like to introduce this format of competition in utility. In this model, the mean utility of an app is a sufficient statistics of price and advertisement for consumers. And the assumption of non-random coefficient in price and its utility is crucial for this. Under this assumption, we can rewrite the per app profit as a function of mean utility of an app. And we can rewrite the game into an equivalent game related to the payoff over the mean utility, and the choice is over the mean utility. So now the developer's problem can be described as if choosing this set of mean utility across apps. In this framework, we can introduce the notion of cost for a consumer for using an app. This cost CJ is defined by the difference between the mean utility achieved when the price and advertisement were both zero, and the mean utility at the equilibrium price and advertisement. In this sense, this is including the disutility from both paying price and watching advertisement. And this nests the standard price competition. For example, if there is no advertisement and if there is only a price, this cost CJ is alpha y times FJ. So this is a disutility of paying FJ unit of price. Thus, this notion of cost generalizes the notion of price, and we can use this notion for a market definition. To estimate the model, we use a data of Google Play from Japan, and we have millions of apps in the data set. Potentially, we can look at the apps that ranked into top 1,000 download and usage ranking in some week. But if you do so, there are many missing weeks. So here we focus on very top apps, very top few hundreds apps. But when we do so, we try to balance the proportion of different business models. So in particular, we try to sample the top apps so that the proportion of business model in the sample regarding whether they are paid or free and whether they are sponsored or free are proportional to the proportion in the population. Okay. And we use the data from March 2015 to January 2017. And here is the share of business models for each product category for non-game application. And we refer to this number later when we interpret the result of the effect of changing the transaction fee. So unique feature of the non-game apps is that there are many free or sponsored media. There are 60% of such apps, but there are non-negligible number of paid apps. Roughly 40% of them are paid apps. And one more unique feature is that among paid apps, there are many apps that are also sponsored by app. And this has some implications for the effect of transaction fee. We will see this later. Okay. At this point, I do not discuss the estimation procedure in detail because the time is constrained, but rather we would like to discuss the key identification assumptions for our analysis. There are two fundamental issues in identifying the parameters of the model. The first problem is this. We observe whether an app shows an advertisement or not. We have this dummy, but we do not directly observe the advertising intensity agent. So we do not observe how much ad was actually shown to a consumer. Usually, we identify the marginal cost from the observed price and the price optimality condition. However, in this paper, we took the reverse view. We elicit the equilibrium advertisement intensity AJ from the advertising optimality condition by assuming that the direct marginal cost of changing the advertising intensity is zero. This can be justified in the app economy because there is an app technology. Once app developer installed the ad technology, then after that, gaining and changing advertising intensity is almost automatic. This is very different from the traditional media, such as newspaper and TVs, that spend lots of resources in retaining and obtaining and retaining some sponsors. So under this assumption, we can elicit the equilibrium advertising intensity, and this is changed by advertisement price, and this variation identifies the disutility of watching an advertisement. And the second problem is that we have a price optimality condition, and this is equality for paid apps. But for free apps, this is an inequality. That means that the idiosyncratic marginal cost shock related to the download cannot be point identified for free apps. In other words, we do not exactly know how marginally or deeply free are free apps. And because of this, some extrapolation is necessary for making a prediction. In this paper, we try to identify the distribution of the cost of free apps by assuming that when there is a sibling apps, the free and paid versions of a pair of sibling apps have the same marginal cost. In other words, when there is a sibling apps, we focus on the paid version of the sibling app. From this, we identify the marginal cost of download, and then use this to predict the implicit interior solution of price for the free version of the app. Okay, and then use this average depth of implied interior price solution as the average, the deepness of the price of the free apps for the other apps. We understand that there would be some bias because the apps that have free and paid version, and they may not represent the entire free apps. So in next version, we may try some more robustness checks for this specification. So these are the main two issues regarding identification. And this is the estimation result. And we found that the disutility of watching a unit of advertisement is roughly 24 Japanese yen. This is like a 24 US cent or something like that. Okay. And next we introduce SNIC test. This is an abbreviation of small but significant and non-transitory increase in price. And in SNIC test, what we do is to check how the profit of a hypothetical monopolist that owns a set of apps changes after 5% increase in the price. And the set of apps is said to form the market if the profit increase as a result of this forced increase in the price. In this app economy, because some of the prices are free, we use the notion of consumer's cost instead of price. So this is called SSNIC test, because the price is replaced with cost. And here's the result. Here we consider a hypothetical merger who owns all the apps belonging to a particular category. And left panel is the result for non-game categories, and right panel is the result for game categories. So what we find here is that in case of non-game categories, none of them are judged as a relevant market, except for the tools category. But even for tools category, increasing the price is profit is only by 0.01%. So this is almost on the at the margin. On the other hand, in case of game categories, some of them exhibits an increase in the profit, like action and casino, casual, puzzle, role-playing, and so on. This is because our demand estimation result shows that consumers are more segmented within each category for game categories. And next, we conducted a merger simulation. And again, we consider a hypothetical monopolist who owns all the apps belonging to a particular category. And we checked how the equilibrium allocation and the surplus changes. And one takeaway from here is that the consumer surplus drops significantly only for the categories where the SNIC test showed an increase in the profit. So this will validate the usage of SNIC test as a convenient screening device of anti-competitive mergers. So finally, I would like to discuss the effect of changing the transaction fee. Okay. We would like to see what happens if the transaction fee is reduced. And we argue that it is possible that price may increase through two channels. And the first channel is a shift from ad revenue to the price revenue. This is related to free ad-sponsored media. In case of a free ad-sponsored media, when the transaction fee on the price drops, they may find it more profitable to change the business model from ad-sponsored free version to the paid app. This can increase the price on average. Second channel is related to the special feature of proportional fee. And this is related to the app that both charges prices and show advertisement to the consumer. This part is a bit involved. In principle, the proportional transaction fee inflates the weight of marginal cost related to the price. Okay. So if the marginal cost is negative, if the marginal cost is positive, as usual, if the transaction fee decreases, this will decrease the price. However, now they have advertising revenue. Then the effective marginal cost of download can be negative because of this advertisement revenue. And then the prediction can be reversed. As a result, when the proportional tax decreases, because this advertisement revenue part is deflated, the price can increase. Okay, this part is a bit tricky, but it can happen for apps that do both charges prices and show advertisement to the consumer. And in case of non-game apps, we had sizable number of apps that belongs to these two categories. And because of that, we may expect that the price can increase as a result of the reduction of transaction fee for non-game apps. And this prediction was true, at least according to our estimated model. We found that the price on average can increase as the transaction fee decreases from 30% to 0. And the price also increases for the game apps, but the increase is more moderate compared to the non-game apps. And advertisement will decrease as a result of reduction in the transaction fee. And this is an implication for the welfare and profit for non-game apps. In this case, the consumer surplus and transaction surplus can decrease as a result of the reduction of transaction fee because the price increases. And the app developers' profit increase and platformers' profit will decrease. And this is the implication for the games. And for the gamers, the consumer surplus and total surplus look changed, but this is almost within the range of numerical error, so you can ignore this part. The implication is that in case of game categories, this is almost like a pure transfer between app developers and platformers. So if the transaction fee drops, the profit will be transferred from platformer to the developers. Okay, so this is the result we have. We conducted a model that allows for coexistence of multiple monetization policies and showed that with this model, we can conduct the usual merger analysis. And we can find some counterintuitive prediction regarding the changes in the transaction fee if we focus on this type of a two-sided market. Sorry that I extended the time a bit.
All right, thank you. Thanks a lot, Kohei. Our discussant is Ying from University of Michigan. Ying, please share insights with us.
Well, thanks to the organizer for inviting me to discuss this this really fun paper. And also I want to thank Kohei for patiently answering my questions, helping me with understanding the paper. All right, so let me start with a very quick summary of the research questions of the paper. And I hope after this, you will be convinced that this is a really interesting paper. So the first research question of the paper is about how to define a relevant market in the app economy. So why do we care about this? The very traditional market definition approach for horizontal merger analysis consists of 4 steps, starting with defining the market, and then we can calculate Herfindahl index and changing Herfindahl index after the merger. Well, without knowing how the market is defined, how can we get market share data? How can we compute Herfindahl index? Right? So the first step is really important, so that we can have the second step. And then the third and the fourth step consists of evaluating other factors, for example, how products change and investment change. And then the fourth would be consider pro-competitive justification. So you can see that the foundation, the first step of this approach is to define market. Okay. And defining market is not trivial. You know, a famous case about the carbonated soft drink. The big debate between the two parties is about whether beer and coffee should be included in the market. Well, one could say yes, one could say no. So defining market is not very trivial. And the traditional test for the first step for defining market is the so-called small but significant and non-transitory increase in price, the so-called SSNIC test. What is that? Basically say, okay, let's consider a hypothetical monopolist who owns, you know, both the soft drink and beer. Will this hypothetical monopolist increase the price by 5%? If the products are close substitute, the answer would be yes. If the products are not close substitute, the answer would be no. So this served as a test for defining market. All right. But in the app market, we know as users that very often the apps are free. Okay. So we can't use the standard SSNIP test. And what's smart about the paper is they propose to use something called small but significant and non-transitory increase in cost, the cost of usage. And the cost for consumers here is ad intensity. So that's the first research question. And then the second research question, which is built on the first research question, once we have defined the relevant market for app markets, then we can talk about what's the welfare effect of a merger. For example, when the developer of a top app in a specific category acquires other top apps. And the third, they also address a very interesting question that's specific for this market, which is what happens when the platform transaction fee, like Apple charges some transaction fee, Apple charges royalty. What if the platform transaction fee is reduced? So those are the 3 key research questions of the paper. So as I mentioned that the paper is related to antitrust in two-sided markets, and this is really an important topic. And so here is the quote from the Supreme Court opinion for the American Express 2018 case. Okay. And let me just read the 2 quotes here. The plaintiffs have not carried their burden to show anti-competitiveness effect. Their argument that American Express anti-steering provisions increase merchant fee wrongly focuses on just one side of the market. Evidence of a price increase on one side of a two-sided transacting platform cannot by itself demonstrate an anti-competitive exercise of market power. Courts must include both sides of the platform, merchants, so in this example, that would be merchants and the cardholders when defining the credit card market. So what this is saying is, for a two-sided market, we have to take into account the two-sidedness. So antitrust in two-sided market is quite different. Precisely because of the two-sided nature, antitrust analysis of a two-sided market is difficult. Let me give you this example. Suppose there are 2 platforms. There's a left side, there's a right side. On the left side, the demand depends on the 2 prices of the 2 firms on the left side, of the 2 platforms on the left side. Also depends on the size of the 2 platforms on the right side. I hope you can see my pen moving here. Okay. And then there's the right side. Again, the demand on the right side for platform 1 depends on the 2 prices of the 2 platforms on the right side and depends on the sizes of the platform on the left side. All right, so you can see that the demand on the left side for platform 1 affects the demand on the right side for the 2 platforms. The demand of the second platform on the left side affects the demand on the right side, vice versa. I apologize to those who are colorblind, but even if you are colorblind, you can see there are many lines here, right? What that means is it's complicated. Okay, in the context of what Kohei and Corsa study, they have these 2 sides. On the one side is the users of the app. On the other side, we have the advertisers. Okay. Users' behavior, users' demand determine 2 things. One is the number of downloads, that's the discrete nature. And the second is the continuous nature, which is the usage, conditional on downloads, how much I'm going to use it. So consumer behavior determines these 2 quantities. And the price they face is called the fee. For advertisers, they decide on the amount of advertisement. The price they face is the advertising rate. Okay, so we have 2 demand functions on the left side, on the user side, the download and usage. And then on the right side, we have the demand, which depends on advertising rate, depends on download times the usage. So again, you see many lines. And I didn't even draw a line from the usage to affecting here because it would be too crowded. So it's really complicated. So how does this paper deal with this challenge? So here's a quote from the paper. The paper transforms the original model of competition, advertising intensity and prices on the 2 sides into an equivalent competition utility model. So I just spent 2 slides telling you how complicated it is. And this model can translate the problem into a simpler problem. So what's the magic here? Let me try to explain that. So I'm going to ignore the existence of marginal cost. I'm going to ignore that the platform charges the royalty. So here, let's for simplicity, the paper does take all this into account. Okay, so now it's just about revenue. The platform J is trying to maximize the revenue from both sides. One, the fee times the demand on the left side, on the user side, and then advertising rate times the quantity of advertising on the right side, on the advertiser side. Okay. The first step the paper does is to assume that advertising quantity is linear in download times the usage. And the proportion is what they call the ad intensity, the little aj. And then we can have a change of variable. Instead of thinking firms choose prices, we can think about firms choose advertising intensity. So that's the first step of the change. Okay. Then the second step, they're going to make the assumption that there's no direct competition on the advertiser side. So platforms do compete. How they compete? They compete with downloads and usage, okay, so that they can sell the download and usage to advertisers. But on the advertising side, they do not compete directly. And specifically, advertising rate is constant across platforms. All right, so we make advertising as a function of the two quantities into just a constant term here. And then once we have done that, we need an additional assumption, which is the fee that users face and the advertising intensity, which is the cost of using the app. These two variables enter the demand, affect the demand only through one summary statistic called mean utility. Okay, so fee and advertising intensity enters the demand only through a summary statistic. And then we can write fee as a function of that summary statistic and advertising. All right, so from here, we're done. Then you can see that AJ shows up here, advertising intensity shows up here without direct competition, without other firms' advertising intensity showing up in this objective function. Okay, so we can conditional on the mean utility. We can write down the optimal advertising intensity. And at the end, this becomes a function of mean utility only. So we degenerated a two-sided complication into one variable. In fact, a vector of variable, every platform's mean utility. Okay, so that's how the model did the simplification. So what are the key assumptions we need for this to work? In my mind, there are two key assumptions. One is there's no direct competition on one side of the market. In their setting, it's advertising. So they assume that there's no direct competition for advertisers. And specifically, they assume that advertising rate is exogenous and common across platforms. And in fact, I think they don't need such a strong, by the way, this assumption is, I think is quite reasonable for their setting, but I still think that, making a similar assumption as Reisman 2004 may be less restrictive. We can assume that advertising rate depends on advertising intensity, but not somebody else's advertising intensity. And my paper makes similar assumptions. Okay, so fundamentally, what we need for this to work is to assume that this is not a real two-sided market. By the way, I want to say that this is not a criticism. After all, myself did that. Okay, so this is not a criticism, but I think what they are doing is potentially useful. I would like to highlight, when do we feel comfortable to use their framework, when not. Okay, so it's by no means meant as a criticism. The second key assumption one needs if we want to borrow their framework is that the fee and the advertising intensity affect the demand through one summary statistic, which is the mean utility. Okay, so that is the key idea of the paper. In terms of empirical implementation, the paper faces some challenges. And I think it would be great if the authors could explain how they address these challenges more clearly. The first challenge, as I can see, is the fact that they don't observe advertising intensity. So Kohei explained this very well. He was very upfront what's the assumption we need. But I think it's also useful to explain a little bit about the exogenous variation. Okay, why do I say that? They need to estimate how advertising intensity affects utility. Okay, and it's unobservable. Their way of dealing with that is to put in the optimal advertising intensity according to the model. And according to the model, it depends on covariance and advertising rate, which they assume to be exogenous. Okay. This covariance also affects utility directly. So what shifts advertising rate without shifting demand directly? It seems to me that the only thing that's left is advertising rate, which seems to vary only across time. So what exactly is the exogenous variation that varies advertising intensity without changing other covariates of the utility function? Right? So I think the discussion here would be useful. Another challenge they are facing is the zero fee. So fundamentally, the firm here is making a constraint optimization problem instead of unconstrained optimization problem. The constraint is the price cannot be negative. Okay? And this constraint is binding very often. Okay, so think about a multi-product firm making a decision and then choosing prices simultaneously, a standard multi-oligopoly model. Sorry, this is even a monopoly model just with three products. Okay, and if the data is such that the first price has a positive price and the second and the third product have zero, then we would have one inequality and two inequalities. And in general, that's what we have as a vector. And we cannot back out marginal cost because we have some inequality. We also cannot write down something like bounds like that. We have a lower bound or upper bound for the fixed cost. So we can use moment inequality. We can't do that either. So this is really a challenge. In the literature, I'm aware of two ways to deal with it. One is Pierre and Kohei's paper, where they have some products where it's sold in some markets without constraint and some markets with a constraint. Then as a result, they can estimate, they basically write down a Lagrangian, recognizing that it's constraint optimization problem. They write down they estimate Lagrangian multipliers together with marginal cost parameters using the variation across these two types of markets. Okay, but I'm not sure whether that would work in the setting of this paper. Another way, so I have a work joint with a Discussant and actually similar problem. We have a price ceiling, not price bottom, we have a price ceiling, but similar problem. And the way we deal with it is for us, we have some firms for whom all the products are unbinding. This allows us to identify the marginal cost parameters and the distribution of the underlying unobservable shocks. So for this product, we will achieve point identification. And then under certain assumptions, we are going to withdraw unobservable shocks from this distribution for the other observations. So for them, we only know the marginal cost. The marginal cost follow a distribution. So that's what's so-called SATO identification. But I think we also face similar challenges here. So it would be good if they can explain this last two slides. And then demand estimation. So this is my final comment. So we know that estimating substitution pattern well is important for defining market and for any merger analysis. So price is very often zero in their setting. And the true cost of using an app for a consumer is the ad intensity. So in that sense, equivalently, when we are obsessed with the substitution pattern, getting the effect of price on demand right, similarly, we may want to be a little bit obsessed with getting the substitution pattern with respect to advertising intensity well. So I wonder whether there is a way to allow for a more flexible model to allow consumer heterogeneity in advertising incentive and yet still be able to use their magic. And also, it will be helpful to see some diversion ratio results. Okay, so overall, I think this is a really very impressive paper, a very comprehensive study of the app market. The framework is potentially useful for other studies in the market or similar markets. I also would like to point out that this paper contributes to a rising literature on digital economy, which is very hot. For example, on the market this year, on the junior market this year, there are two papers. And if you don't mind, I would like to promote my student. And Xuan, she's really a very good student. And she studies preferential search ranking and its consequence in the Apple app market. And it's quite complementary to this paper that's presented here. Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, Ying. Thank you for your very insightful discussion, and also, I bet your advertising for your student definitely, work out here, because I see, a few videos, show up, like Michael and Yi Huang suddenly show up on the screen because, then maybe they just want to see the name more carefully and ask you questions about your students' job market paper later. I will give some time to Kohei. Kohei, do you have any? Maybe like spend 5 minutes to see if you have anything you want to address or maybe respond to Ying's discussion.
Okay, thank you for carefully reading my paper. And the issues that you raised are all exactly the points that we were concerned. So start from the first one, the elicitation of the advertising intensity. And as you suggested, actually the only variation is coming from the advertisement price. And this variation is limited because it's only across time. So other than that would be based on functional form. That's one comment. And currently, at this point, we only had the market level price data. But after that, we somehow tried to get individual publisher level advertisement price. So in next paper or next version or something, we may try to integrate more micro level advertisement price, and we may be able to use more variations. But at this point, it's a combination of a variation in the market level advertisement price and the functional form. That's one comment. And second is for the free fee problem. And yeah, so this is one approach that we took. And on top of this, I'm going to follow Ying's approach. So we estimate the distribution of the marginal cost from paid products. And then in the simulation, we use a draw from distribution to integrate out the marginal cost of free apps. We may consider this version as well. That's another issue. Other than that, I don't think there is a fundamental way to solve this because there's no information in the data to identify the marginal cost exactly for binding products. And lastly, I had another one. Can you show the slide again? One before. Slide one before. Oh yeah, this part. So yes, so we would like to introduce heterogeneity to the other intensity, and in particular to the usage-related utility. But once we do this, we cannot convert this model to a mean in utility model. And conceptually, we can do that, but not sure whether we can get numerically a stable result. That's the only concern. And that's one concern. And second concern is that because my data is at the market level, not at consumer level, then even if we allow for this level of heterogeneity in the model, I'm not sure I can confidently identify that heterogeneity without a consumer level panel data. So I will address this issue when I can get more richer data at the consumer level. But at this point, I don't think I can get a meaningful result, even if I allow for heterogeneity on the advertising intensity and usage-related utility. So I accept this as a limitation and restriction in the current data and our current model. Yeah, that's my comments to the issues that you raised. Thank you for making these things clear.
All right, thanks, Kohei. I would like to open this up to our floor to see if there are any questions that, yeah.
Can I?
Michael, please. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I'm very, very distant from the literature, so I really appreciate Ying spent a lot of time working through the details to educate me. So sorry for the naivety of my following questions. So I try to understand two things. Actually, both are centered around the main issue, that is the market power of those online game developers. So a typical concern for people outside literature like me is, over time, you really worried about increasing market power of online game developers. So I'm not so sure if the data, the fantastic data from Japan, is helpful in giving us some clues on that. That's the first one. The second one is you show us, the SNIC test. You have shown us the distinctive difference between, say, non-game apps and game apps, right? It seems to me, it's suggesting some market power of game developers. But is there a way to compare, how big is the market power of online game developers with some comparable product producers in offline industries? So just give a sense about, what is the current status about the online and offline market power differences.
Okay,
thank you.
So first, so in this paper, we are assessing the market power of mobile games. And our estimate suggests that the consumers are more sticking to a particular category. They do not go to the other categories. That's the reason why a game developer has a higher market power than non-game apps. In case of non-game apps, if the price increases, they may just go to the other categories because they are equivalent in the sense that there is a way to pass some time. But game is different. They stick to particular category. So in that sense, I think they are showing some market power of mobile games. And the way to compare the market power of mobile games and more classical console-based or PC-based game will be to compare the price elasticity of demand. I haven't yet compared this number with the existing literature, but definitely I think I will be able to find some estimate of the price elasticity for the traditional games. And then I think I can speak to that point. But at this point, I don't have a clue. I don't have any comparison between these two.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question from Yi Huang. Yi, do you want to ask that yourself, please?
Yeah. Okay, my signal was not great, but can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So also, I'm not very familiar with the literature. But one question always in my mind is like a platform externalities. So think about spillover, maybe gaming, you pass through to another products from app market. Also, as Professor Michael Song just mentioned, online spillover to offline. Thank you very much.
So spillover can exist in the demand side and the developer side. Like for consumer side, there be some complementarity across apps. And on the developer side, there may be some complementarity in investment and so on. And on top of this, there's a network effect. Like if there are more consumers, it's more profitable for advertisers, and if there are more advertisers, something happens. So in this model, I'm limiting those interactions a bit. So we didn't allow for the complementarity on the demand side. We didn't allow for the complementarity on the demand side, also the developer side. And we didn't have an index network effect because we didn't allow for the competition in the advertisement market. So yeah, potentially that could be an interesting issue, but I cannot address it. But as I said, at least for the network effect, in the next paper, I may be able to address because I'm going to get the publisher level advertisement intensity and advertisement price data, and then we can capture the market power of publishers on the advertisement market side. And then there will be a direct network effect between consumers and advertisers market, and then I can see. But for the other complementarities, I'm not sure whether I can discuss it. There would be existing papers that try to address it, but people are still struggling with addressing that issue. Yeah, sorry for that.
Okay, I didn't see any additional question in the chat box. Kohei, maybe I just also ask, I saw the paper once before, so I'll possibly ask my fair share of the questions, but just like, Ying's great discussion sort of makes me think there's just one question I want to ask is that since you were looking at the mergers, I missed a little bit of the details about whether the merger happens in real life already or not. In a way that I think, would your model be able to speak a little bit in terms of the if you actually put your model to the test of the real event study, how fair does that that's related to the product market definition question, I guess, that Ying was having. Like, I've been just wondering, like, did you ever try, or to think about, how does that fare with the real merger episode that you observed?
So, for example, we can conduct what will happen if the Facebook and WhatsApp split, because both apps are in the data, and what if the YouTube and the Google are split. But one problem is that because of confidentiality, I cannot name or even cannot hint the name of the apps in my paper. So we conducted this internally, but I cannot write this in the paper. So that's a real problem. This is a company that is selling the data to the app developers, so they do not want to have any trouble with the app developers and publishers. So they are very sensitive to suggesting the name. So I'm sorry for that. Yeah, I internally run this in our computer, but I cannot release it to you.
I see. Got it. Okay. Yeah. I think we're really right on time. Actually, I just seems like the audience doesn't have further questions, so I would really like to thank Kohei and Ying again for great presentation. Really useful discussion too. So hopefully we're gonna see each other 1 month from now. I see Bernie. Do you have any? You want to make a final announcement for the next talk?
Well, thank you very much. I'm quite far away from today's paper, and I learned a lot, and I really thank a lot to the presenter and the discussions and the questions. And thank you, Daniel, for moderating this. We are going to reconvene on the 5th of January, and the topic is going to be a fintech lending and cashless payment, the synergy between the two. So I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.